The Adventures of Henry R. Schoolcraft, from his journal of 1818-1819, Part 3. Mr. Schoolcraft spoke briefly of an Osage Indian village. Now, it's been close to, at the time I wrote this booklet, 40 years since man first set foot on the surface of the moon, and it's difficult for me, having grown up in that era when we were reaching more strenuously for other worlds, to imagine what it must have been like for Mr. Schoolcraft to be exploring this continent. Difficult to picture the United States in such a barren wilderness, which made it a frontier to be conquered. As Mr. Schoolcraft continued his journey through the wilds of Missouri and Arkansas, he has painted a word picture for us of how an abandoned village of the Osage Indians had been constructed. Picture this. You're traveling through a strange territory on foot, and you've been warned time and again of how treacherous the Indians you might encounter would be. Then you stumble across an Indian village that appears to be deserted, and you begin to explore, and you hope there is no one around. That's where Mr. Schoolcraft and Mr. Pettibone are as we pick up his narrative. Wednesday, December 30th, 1818. In pursuing up the valley of Swan Creek about 9 miles, we fell into the Osage Trace, a horse path beaten by the Osages in their hunting excursions along this river, and passed successively 3 of their camps, which were deserted, all very large and arranged with much neatness, and capable of quartering about 100 men each. Both the method of building camps and the order of encampment observed by this singular nation of savages are different from anything of the kind I have noticed among the various tribes of Aboriginal Americans, though whose territories I have had the occasion to travel. The forms of the tent or camp may be compared to an inverted bird's nest or hemisphere with a small hole left in the top for smoke to escape from. A similar but larger hole is located at one side for passing in and out. Mr. Schoolcraft then went on to tell of the actual construction of just such a lodge, and he said, "It is formed by cutting a number of slender, flexible green poles of equal length, sharpened at each end, stuck in the ground like a bow, and crossing at right angles at the top, the points of the entrance to the ground forming a circle." The shape sounds not much different from a tent that I have out in our front yard right now. Modern tent makers, it seems, took a lesson from the dwellers of the woodlands. But Mr. Schoolcraft continued, "Small twigs are then woven in, mixed with leaves of cane, moss, and grass until it is perfectly tight and warm. These tents are arranged in large circles, one within another, according to the number of men intended to be accommodated. In the center is a scaffolding for meat, from which all are supplied every morning, under the inspection of a chief, whose tent is conspicuously situated at the head of the encampment, and differs from all the rest, resembling a half-cylinder inverted. Their women and children generally accompany them on these excursions, which often occupy 3 months. The boys and drones who do not help in hunting are obliged to eat the intestines of the killed animals. The wastefulness of the white man is next compared to the conservative nature of the Indian when it comes to using those things in nature found around him. The white hunter, on encamping in his journeys, cuts down green trees and builds a large fire of long logs sitting at some distance from it. The Indian hunts up a few dry limbs, cracks them into little pieces of about a foot in length, builds a small fire, and sits close by it. He gets as much warmth as the white hunter, without half the labor, and doesn't burn more than a 50th part of the wood. The Indian considers the forest his own, and is careful in using and preserving everything that it affords. He never kills more meat than he has occasion for. The white hunter destroys all before him and cannot resist the opportunity of killing game, although he neither wants the meat nor can carry the skins. This instance occurred recently on the White River. A hunter, returning from the woods heavy laden with the flesh and skins of 5 bears, unexpectedly arrived in the midst of a drove of buffalo, and wantonly shot down 3, having no other object than the sport of killing them. This is one of the causes for the enmity existing between the white and red hunters of Missouri. On reaching the 3rd Osage encampment, we left the valley of Swan Creek, holding a northwest course. The Adventures of Henry R. Schoolcraft, from his journal of 1818-1819, Part 3. Mr. Schoolcraft spoke briefly of an Osage Indian village. Now, it's been close to, at the time I wrote this booklet, 40 years since man first set foot on the surface of the moon.